My name is Cora Valerius. For as long as I can remember, I've found a certain kind of poetry in the bones of a building. Not just in the grand, sweeping facades, but in the quiet integrity of a perfectly joined beam, the silent strength of a deep foundation. My father was a carpenter, a man who spoke more with his hands than his mouth, and he taught me that the things you don't see are what hold everything else up. It's a lesson I carried with me from his dusty workshop to the gleaming glass and steel world of Ethelgard Architects, one of the most respected firms in the coastal city of Crestfall Bay. Crestfall Bay is a city that lives and breathes by the sea, a place where modern glass towers reflect the ever-changing moods of the Pacific. For 7 years, I had poured my life into this firm, climbing from a junior drafter to a senior structural architect. My work was my identity. It was the place where I, a quiet woman in a field dominated by loud, confident men, could make my voice heard through the elegant logic of my design's my masterpiece. The project that had truly saved the firm 2 years ago was the Oceanic Pavilion. When a key investor had pulled out of a major high-rise project, leaving Ethelgard on the brink of financial collapse, I had stayed up for 3 days straight, fueled by black coffee and a desperate spark of an idea. I sketched a design for a public cultural center, a building that cantilevered daringly over the rocky shoreline, its roof shaped like a cresting wave. It was an engineering marvel, a love letter to the ocean, and it was buildable on a fraction of the original project's budget. The city council loved it, new funding poured in, and Ethelgard was saved. My name was mentioned in a footnote in the internal memo, but the soaring glass wave of the pavilion became the new icon of Crestfall Bay's skyline. I told myself that was enough. The work, I believed, should speak for itself. When Edmund Thorne, our venerable head of special projects, announced his retirement, a quiet thrill went through me. It was my time. I had more than earned it. I had Edmund's respect, the trust of the engineering team, and a portfolio that included the most successful project in the firm's recent history. I began to allow myself to dream of the corner office with its view of the pavilion, of leading the teams that would shape the future of the city. Then came Leo Maxwell, who was the nephew of Marcus Maxwell, the firm's managing partner and a man whose ambition was matched only by his impeccably tailored suits. Leo was 29, with a dazzling smile, a handshake that felt more like a political gesture than a greeting, and a resume that read like a fantasy novel of architectural achievements. He spoke with easy confidence about projects at rival firms, yet in team meetings, he would ask questions so basic they would make our interns blush. He once referred to a critical load-bearing wall in a blueprint as a decorative divider. My colleagues and I would exchange knowing, weary glances over our monitors. We all saw what was happening, but in the carefully controlled ecosystem of Ethelgard, speaking out against Marcus Maxwell was a form of career suicide. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning, in a sterile, all-hands email. Leo Maxwell would be the new head of special projects. The words seemed to blur on my screen. It wasn't just a disappointment, it felt like an erasure. 7 years of dedication, of late nights and sacrificed weekends, of pouring my soul into concrete and steel, all dismissed in favor of a name. A cold, heavy stillness settled in my chest. I did what I thought was right. I followed the protocol. First, a meeting with Helen in Human Resources. She listened with practiced sympathy, her face a mask of corporate concern. "Cora, we deeply value your contributions," she said, her hands folded neatly on her desk. "But Leo brings a fresh perspective. We need to support the firm's decision and be team players." "Did anyone verify the accomplishments on his resume, Helen?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. Because I know people at 2 of those firms. They don't remember him leading any of those projects. Helen's pleasant expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "The hiring committee was very thorough, Cora. We should trust their judgment." Next, I went to Edmund, the man I was supposed to succeed. We sat in his office, surrounded by framed photos of the buildings he'd brought to life over 40 years. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped in his worn tweed jacket. "I know, Corey," he said, sighing. "Believe me, I know. I put your name forward. I told Marcus you were the only logical choice. He stared out the window at the distant gleam of the Oceanic Pavilion. But Marcus has the board in his pocket. He's a powerful man. Picking a fight with him is a good way to find yourself blacklisted in the city. Sometimes, he added, turning back to me, his eyes filled with a sort of weary apology, you just have to know which battles aren't winnable. His words, meant to be kind, felt like a betrayal. We were architects. We built things that were meant to withstand storms. If our own house was built on a rotten foundation, how could we be trusted to build for anyone else? That's what led me to Marcus Maxwell's door. His office was an exercise in minimalist power, a vast black marble desk, a single, dramatic orchid, and a floor-to-ceiling window offering a god's-eye view of the city I had helped to build. Leo's appointment is a mistake, I began, my voice steady despite the frantic beating of my heart. He doesn't have the experience to lead projects of this complexity. The safety of these structures, the integrity of this firm, it's all at risk. Marcus didn't even look up from his computer, his fingers still tapping rhythmically on the keyboard. My nephew is a rising star, Cora. He has my full confidence. The decision is final. With all due respect, sir, I pressed on, the Oceanic Pavilion's cantilever system, the one that won us the Civic Pride Award, was my design. I solved the resonance issues that 3 senior engineers couldn't crack. I have earned that position. He finally stopped typing and leaned back, his chair sighing in protest. He looked at me, not as a valued employee, but as an irritating problem that needed to be solved. Know your place, Cora. Leo has my protection. I control HR. This conversation is over. The phrase "know your place" echoed in the silent, cavernous office. It was meant to put me back in the box I had been trying to climb out of my entire career. I stood there for a moment, the shock giving way to a cold, clear anger. I had played by the rules. I had trusted the system. And the system had told me I was irrelevant. I straightened my spine, meeting his dismissive gaze. You are making a serious mistake, Marcus, I said, my voice low and even. One that will have consequences for everyone at this firm. He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound. Is that a threat? From you? He waved a hand towards the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. I left without another word, closing his door softly behind me. As I walked through the open-plan office, the familiar hum of keyboards and quiet conversations felt alien. No one knew the silent, seismic shift that had just occurred. No one knew that I was about to do the one thing I had never wanted to do. I was going to make waves. I didn't go back to my desk. I walked out of the building, the cool sea breeze a welcome shock against my heated skin. I found a small, quiet park overlooking the harbor, a green oasis tucked between the steel giants I worked among. I sat on a bench, watching the ferries glide across the water, their wakes leaving transient patterns on the surface. In my pocket, my phone felt like a lead weight. I pulled it out and looked at the name on the screen, Nina Reyes. Nina and I had been roommates in university, sharing late-night study sessions over cheap pizza and big dreams. While I had gone on to design buildings, she had dedicated herself to making sure they didn't fall down. She was now the head of the Municipal Structural Integrity Board, the city's top safety official. Her signature was on the permits for every major construction project in Crestfall Bay, including the Oceanic Pavilion. We had a pact, never to mix our friendship with our professional lives. But Marcus Maxwell had just rewritten all the rules. My finger hovered over the call button. Was I really about to do this? To use my friendship as a weapon? To potentially invite scrutiny and chaos into the firm I had loved and helped build? Then I thought of Leo, with his charming ignorance, being responsible for the calculations that kept thousands of people safe every day. I thought of the subtle, dangerous modifications he had already proposed for the new waterfront residential tower, changes to the rebar specifications in the foundation, something he'd called a cost-saving measure that made my blood run cold. They were small things, easily missed, but they were cracks in the foundation. And I knew how small cracks could grow. I pressed the button, Corey. I was just thinking about you. Nina's voice was warm, a welcome sound in my lonely turmoil. I saw an article about the pavilion's anniversary. You must still be so proud. I am, I said, my own voice steadier than I felt. Nina, that's actually why I'm calling. It's about the new waterfront tower Ethelgard is breaking ground on next week. Her tone shifted instantly, the warmth replaced by professional focus. What about it? There have been some recent changes to the material specifications. In the foundation. I took a breath. And the person who approved them. He lacks the qualifications to make that kind of judgment. There are serious safety concerns. A long silence stretched over the line, punctuated only by the distant cry of a gull. Cora, that's a very heavy accusation, she finally said, her voice careful. I know. I wouldn't be making it if I wasn't absolutely certain. Another pause. This warrants an immediate, unscheduled review before we issue the final construction permits, she said decisively. I can have a team on site tomorrow morning. And I'll need to arrange an emergency meeting with the Ethelgard board. I'll need you to provide me with specifics. I have everything documented, I said, after we hung up. I sat on the bench as the afternoon sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. I had just pulled the pin on a grenade. I didn't know if I had just saved the firm from itself or signed the death warrant for my own career. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered, my throat tight. Who is this? Of a woman's voice, sharp and laced with panic. This is Cora Valerius. This is Eleanor Shaw, chair of the Ethelgard board. The city's head of structural integrity just called me to schedule an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. She mentioned an anonymous tip about potential safety violations. Do you have any idea what this could do to our firm's reputation? To our insurance bonds? To the waterfront project? I have a very clear idea, Ms. Shaw, I replied, my voice calm. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overlaid with a strange new sense of resolve. I tried to raise these concerns through the proper channels. I was told to know my place. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her tone was different. Colder, more calculated. What is it you want, Ms. Valerius? Before I could answer, another call came through. It was Marcus Maxwell. I asked Ms. Shaw to hold and switched lines. What have you done? He hissed, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, replaced by raw fury. The city is threatening to pull our permits for the waterfront tower. They're asking about Leo's qualifications. I believe I mentioned there would be consequences. Marcus, I said evenly, you'll never work in this city again. I'll destroy you. No, you won't, I said, a profound certainty settling over me. The inspection is happening because there are legitimate safety concerns. Your nephew approved substandard rebar specifications to save a fraction of a % on the budget. That's not my opinion, Marcus. That's a fact. And I have the documents to prove it. His fury collapsed into desperation. Tell me what you want. The promotion? Is that it? Money? Just call your friend and tell her it was a misunderstanding. It's too late for that. The concerns have been officially logged. But how this looks for Ethelgard? That depends on what you do next. I switched back to Eleanor Shaw. I apologize for the wait, Ms. Shaw. You asked what I want. I want 3 things. First, the creation of a new position, Director of Design Integrity, reporting directly to the board, not to Marcus Maxwell. I want that position. Second, I want the authority to build my own team of structural engineers to review every active project. And third, I want Marcus and Leo Maxwell removed from any position where they can influence structural or material decisions. That is a substantial request, Eleanor said, her voice tight. The alternative is a public safety investigation that could bankrupt this firm and put its senior partners at risk of criminal negligence, I countered. You have until the meeting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to decide. I added, my voice hardening slightly. I should also mention that I have documented every conversation I've had about this issue, including the one where Mr. Maxwell told me to know my place. If this firm chooses to retaliate, that documentation goes straight to the press. You've thought this through, she said, a grudging respect in her tone. I'm an architect, I replied. Thinking things through is my job. As I hung up, my hands finally began to shake. I had just bet my entire future on a single, desperate gambit. But as I watched the last sliver of sun disappear below the ocean, I realized it wasn't desperation that had driven me. It was self-respect. For years, I had believed my work would speak for me. I finally understood that sometimes, you have to find your own voice, too. That evening, my small apartment felt both like a sanctuary and a cage. I paced the length of the living room, the city lights twinkling through the window like 1,000 unblinking eyes. My cat, a little shadow of gray fur named Soot, followed my movements, his silent companionship a small comfort. Did I just burn everything to the ground, Soot? I whispered, scooping him into my arms. He purred, a tiny engine of reassurance against my chest. My phone had been buzzing incessantly since I'd gotten home. Missed calls from Marcus. Texts from concerned colleagues asking about the rumors that were already spreading like wildfire. I silenced it and spent the next few hours doing the only thing that felt productive. I prepared. I organized my files with meticulous care. The original blueprints for the waterfront tower, Leo's signed modification orders with their dangerously flawed calculations, my email correspondence with HR and Edmund, and witness statements I'd discreetly gathered from 2 junior engineers who had been alarmed by Leo's incompetence. It was a fortress of facts, my only defense against the storm that was coming. Around 10 o'clock, my doorbell rang, the sudden sound jarring in the quiet apartment. My heart leaped into my throat. Through the peephole, I saw the weary, familiar face of Edmund Thorne. I opened the door. Edmund, what are you doing here? May I come in, Cora? He asked, his voice low. There's something you need to know before tomorrow. He stepped inside, looking small and out of place in my cozy living room. He refused my offer of tea, choosing to stand by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The board has been in an emergency session for hours, he began. Marcus is fighting tooth and nail. He's painting you as a disgruntled employee, unstable, fabricating evidence because you were passed over for a promotion. A hot surge of anger washed over me. That's not true. I have proof. I know, Edmund said, turning to face me. His expression was etched with shame. And that's why I'm here. What he's doing. It's not the first time. I waited, my breath held. A few years back, before you were on the special projects team, Marcus's brother-in-law was our head of procurement. He signed off on a batch of substandard concrete for the foundation of the Meridian building. It almost failed the stress tests. We caught it just in time, but it cost millions to fix. I never heard about this, I said, stunned. Of course not. It was buried. The board gave Marcus a slap on the wrist and made him fire the brother-in-law. They thought he'd learned his lesson. Edmund shook his head slowly. When you forced their hand with the city inspection, Eleanor Shaw started digging. She's realizing this isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern. He met my gaze, his own eyes watery. I'm telling you this because I'm going to speak to the board tomorrow. I'm going to tell them everything I know. About your work on the pavilion. About Leo's incompetence. And about my own cowardice for not speaking up sooner. A lump formed in my throat. Why now, Edmund? Because of you, he said simply. I'm a few weeks from retirement. I wanted to slip away quietly. But you put everything on the line today, not for ambition, but because it was the right thing to do. You reminded me of the architect I used to be. He gave me a sad smile. Don't thank me yet. Marcus has allies on that board. Tomorrow will not be easy. After he left, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of strategies and fears. Just after midnight, a text from Nina lit up my phone. Be ready for anything. They will try to discredit you. At 6 a.m., I rose and dressed with ceremonial care. A simple, dark gray dress, a tailored black blazer, me armor for the battle ahead. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was tired, the skin under her eyes smudged with shadow, but her jaw was set with a resolve that felt new, and fragile, and fierce. Arrived at the Ethelgard offices at 7:30. The building was unnervingly quiet. As I walked towards my desk to print my documents, I saw one of my teammates, a young, brilliant engineer named Liam, already at his desk. Cora, he whispered, his eyes wide. What is going on? There are rumors you called in a city safety inspection. I reported some concerns, Liam. That's all. He leaned closer. Marcus's assistant was in his office an hour ago, packing his personal things into boxes. And I saw 2 board members I've never seen here before go into the main conference room. Something big is happening. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Eleanor Shaw. Miss Valerius. Please come to the executive conference room. Now. The meeting isn't until 9, I said, my pulse quickening. This is a pre-meeting, she replied, her voice leaving no room for argument. Just you, me, and 2 members of the board. My mind raced as I rode the silent elevator to the top floor. This was it. They were either going to fire me before the inspectors arrived, or they were going to accept my terms. The conference room doors were made of frosted glass, blurring the figures within. I pushed one open and stepped inside. Eleanor Shaw sat at the head of a long, polished table. 2 grim-faced older men, board members, were seated to her right. And directly across from the empty chair reserved for me, sat Marcus Maxwell. My stomach plummeted. His presence could only mean one thing. They were siding with him. Ms. Valerius, thank you for coming, Eleanor said, her tone formal. Please, sit down. I took my seat, my back ramrod straight, and met Marcus's gaze. His face was pale and drawn, his usual smug confidence completely gone. He wouldn't look me in the eye. Before the city officials arrive, Eleanor continued, we wanted to address this situation internally. Mr. Maxwell has something to say. All eyes turned to Marcus. He cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound. I have tendered my resignation, he said, his voice a hollow echo of its usual authority. Effective immediately. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. The board has accepted his resignation, Eleanor clarified, her expression unreadable. And we have rescinded Leo Maxwell's appointment. She slid a slim leather-bound folder across the table towards me. We conducted our own internal review last night, Ms. Valerius. Your allegations prompted us to look deeper than we should have needed to. What we found was a disturbing pattern of nepotism and poor judgment that has put this firm at considerable risk. One of the board members spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. We owe you an apology. And our gratitude. You forced us to see a problem we had been willfully ignoring. I opened the folder. Inside was a contract. The title at the top read, Director of Design Integrity. The terms were exactly as I had demanded, with a salary that made my breath catch in my throat. This was it. The victory. But as I looked at Marcus, a man defeated and diminished, I felt no elation, only a profound sense of gravity. This offer is contingent on the city inspection going well, I assume? I asked. Eleanor shook her head. No. This offer is firm. We need you in this role, Cora. The question is, are you willing to help us navigate the mess you've uncovered? I took a deep breath. I have a few more conditions. Marcus's head shot up, a flicker of his old disbelief in his eyes. First, I said, Edmund Thorne stays until his planned retirement date. We need his experience for a smooth transition, and he did the right thing in the end. Second, I want a full, independent audit of every project Marcus or his appointees have touched in the last 5 years. And third, I want a formal, public addendum to the Oceanic Pavilion project files, acknowledging me as the lead designer and structural architect. I paused, then added one last thing, looking directly at Marcus. And I want a fair review process established for every employee who has been passed over for promotion in the last 7 years. Eleanor Shaw looked at her fellow board members, who both gave her a slight nod. Done, she said. Now, can you help us prepare for the inspectors? They'll be here in less than an hour. The next 60 minutes were a frantic, focused blur. I gathered Liam and another trusted engineer, and we laid out all the evidence, the flawed plans, the substandard materials, and our proposed remediation strategy. We didn't hide a thing. At precisely 9 o'clock, Nina arrived, flanked by 2 other city officials. Her expression was professionally stern, but as Eleanor introduced me as Ethelgard's new Director of Design Integrity, I saw her eyebrows lift in a silent, surprised acknowledgement, walked them through everything, holding nothing back. We showed them the cracks in our foundation, both literal and metaphorical, and presented our comprehensive plan to repair them. The inspection was grueling. At the end, Nina and her team conferred privately for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she returned to the conference room, where the board and I waited anxiously. Ethelgard has severe procedural deficiencies, she began, and my heart sank. However, she continued, in light of the firm's complete transparency today and the robust corrective actions already underway, we are prepared to issue a conditional permit for the waterfront project. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. This will be subject to rigorous monthly reviews for the next year. Don't make me regret this, Cora. I won't, I promise. As the meeting broke up, Edmund approached me, a genuine smile lighting up his tired face. Director Valerius, he said, testing the title. You did it. We did it, I corrected him. A word of caution, he added, his smile fading. I saw Marcus leaving the building. He was on the phone with someone, furious. He said, she won't get away with this. I'll make her pay. He's a man with a long memory and a lot of friends. Watch your back. The warning settled over me, a chilling counterpoint to the day's victory. I had won the battle, but the war for the soul of Ethelgard was just beginning. And Marcus Maxwell, though vanquished for now, was still out there, a ghost in the machine. As I looked out the window at the city skyline, at the Oceanic Pavilion gleaming in the morning sun, I felt the immense weight of the task ahead. But for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 6 months later, the title of Director of Design Integrity felt less like a victory and more like a vocation. My days were spent sifting through the architectural archaeology of Marcus Maxwell's tenure, unearthing years of buried compromises and quiet corruptions. With Edmund's guidance and my hand-picked team, we were slowly but surely rebuilding Ethelgard's foundations, replacing a culture of connections with a culture of competence. The firm was breathing again. We had passed 2 of Nina's monthly reviews with flying colors. Morale was on the rise as talented people, long overlooked, were finally being given the opportunities they deserved. I was exhausted, but it was the deep, satisfying exhaustion that comes from meaningful work. The ghost of Marcus Maxwell had faded, and I began to believe his threat had been nothing more than the empty rage of a dethroned king. Then, an email appeared in my inbox that changed everything. It was from Zenith Designs, our biggest and most aggressive competitor. It was a job offer, and it was staggering. They wanted me to be their new head of global engineering, a massive leap in responsibility, with a salary and benefits package that seemed almost fictional. It was the kind of offer that could define a career. It was also deeply unsettling. Zenith was notorious for its cutthroat practices. Why would they want me, an architect whose reputation was built on integrity and safety protocols? It's a trap, isn't it? Edmund said when I showed him the offer. We were in my office, which had once been Marcus's. I'd replaced the marble desk with a warm oak one and filled the space with plants and blueprints. It feels like one, I admitted. But what's the angle? Marcus has friends at Zenith, Edmund said quietly. Powerful ones. That evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Can we meet? It's important. Leo Maxwell. My first instinct was to delete it. But curiosity, and a sliver of pity for the young man caught in his uncle's web, got the better of me. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop far from the downtown core. He looked completely different. The designer suit was gone, replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. The cocksure grin had been replaced by a quiet anxiety. "Thank you for coming," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I heard about the job offer from Zenith." "What about it?" I asked, my tone guarded. He took a deep breath. "It's my uncle. He set it up. He wants you to take the job." I frowned. "Why would he want me to go to his friends at Zenith?" "Because the moment you accept, he's going to leak a doctored set of files to their board," Leo explained, his voice barely a whisper. "Files that prove you've been stealing Ethelgard's proprietary designs for the last 6 months. He wants to ruin you publicly. Destroy your reputation so completely that no one will ever trust you again." The cold, calculating cruelty of it took my breath away. "And if I don't take the job?" "That's phase 2, he said, finally looking up at me, his eyes full of a desperate sincerity. "He's been working with 2 board members who are still loyal to him, Gideon and Miles. He's convinced them that you're a liability, that your rigid safety protocols are slowing down projects and costing the firm money. He's going to have them call for a vote of no confidence in your leadership at the next board meeting." He slid his phone across the table. "He doesn't know I have this." He was careless. I pressed play. It was a recording of Marcus's voice, clear and chilling, outlining the entire strategy to Gideon and Miles. The evidence was irrefutable. "Why are you telling me this, Leo?" I asked softly. "After everything." A flush of shame crept up his neck. "Because you were right. About all of it. I was drowning in that job, and too arrogant to admit it. Since being moved to the marketing department, I'm actually good at it. I like it. You gave me a chance to find out what I was actually meant to do." He pushed the phone towards me. "Consider this me finally earning my place." I walked home through the quiet evening streets, the recording on Leo's phone a toxic weight in my pocket. Marcus hadn't been a ghost, he'd been a saboteur, working in the shadows. But this time, I wasn't a lone employee fighting for a promotion. I was a director, with a team and allies. This time, I wouldn't just be defending my position, I'd be protecting the future of the firm. The next morning, I requested an emergency session with Eleanor Shaw. I played her the recording. Her face, normally a study in composure, hardened into a mask of cold fury. At the board meeting that afternoon, Gideon and Miles began their carefully rehearsed speech about my overzealous approach and its impact on profitability. Before they could finish, Eleanor cut them off. "We are all aware of your concerns, gentlemen," she said, her voice like ice. "And we are also aware of their origin." She looked at me. "Cora, if you would." I didn't play the recording. I didn't need to. Instead, I presented the findings from my department's latest auditor report that went far deeper than anyone expected. In reviewing the procurement records from Marcus Maxwell's tenure, I said, my voice ringing with clarity in the silent room, we discovered a consistent pattern. A single supplier, Keystone Materials, was used for critical structural components on 12 major projects, despite being consistently more expensive and, in 6 documented cases, providing materials that failed to meet our specifications. I put a slide up on the screen, a complex web of corporate ownership. Keystone Materials, it turns out, is a shell corporation. Its majority shareholder is another company, which is registered to Marcus's wife. For 10 years, he has been using this firm as his personal bank, overcharging his own clients and endangering the public, all for personal profit. The silence in the room was absolute. Gideon and Miles looked as though they'd been turned to stone. The fallout was swift and decisive. Faced with irrefutable evidence of felony fraud, Marcus Maxwell's allies on the board vanished. Gideon and Miles offered their immediate resignations. The board voted unanimously to turn the evidence over to the district attorney. There was no satisfaction in his final, utter ruin. There was no joy in seeing a man's legacy turn to ash. The only feeling was a quiet, profound relief. The ghost was finally gone. The house was cleaned. A year has passed since that day. Ethelgard is thriving. Our reputation for integrity now as solid as our foundations. Leo is the head of the marketing department, and he is brilliant. Edmund enjoys his retirement, often stopping by to see the new generation of architects I am mentoring. Sometimes, late at night, I stand in my office and look out at the city. I can see the Oceanic Pavilion, its glass wave illuminated against the dark water, a constant reminder of where this journey began. I didn't set out to start a revolution. I just wanted the job I deserved. But in fighting for my own place, I ended up helping a whole company find its moral center. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't about tearing someone else down. It's about having the courage to build something better and more beautiful in its place. It's about building something that will last.